Ohio State has been one of the most talked about teams of the offseason heading into the 2024 season, and for good reason, really. They've had a lot going on. They've had, obviously, coaching changes, one big one in particular with them bringing in Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator, poaching him from UCLA, where he had been the head coach for several years. And then when it comes to the transfer portal, it's not that Ohio State's never used a transfer portal, but we've never seen them use it to the extent that they've used it this offseason, bringing in some very high-profile players, immediate impact type players. I mean, you look at Caleb Downs, some say one of, if not the best safeties in all of college football. Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ole Miss, who I think was definitely the best available running back in the portal and one of the best 4 or 5 running backs in the entire country. They have changed quarterbacks. Of course, it didn't really work out that well with Honda McCord there last year. He's gone, transferred out. They bring in Will Howard out of Kansas State to run the offense there. So the expectations are high at a place like Ohio State every single year, but sort of the combination, I think, of a few things are going on here in terms of the pressure being at almost an all-time high, really, at Ohio State. Definitely an all-time high at Ohio State under Ryan Day as head coach. The pressure every year, nothing like what we're going to see this year, immense pressure. When you talk about losing now 3 straight to Michigan, not winning the Big Ten for 3 years in a row, and then watching your rival, Michigan, win the national title last year, on top of the fact that it appears that Ohio State as a whole is going all in, basically, on the 2024 season with the way they've attacked the transfer portal. Now, in today's video, we're just going to take a look at Ohio State's schedule. Now, I've done sort of a series of these videos looking at some key teams for 2024, specifically their schedule. So this video isn't necessarily a prediction video. It's not even really a roster breakdown or anything like that. We talked a little bit about that at the beginning with the transfer portal, just because you really can't talk about Ohio State right now without talking about some of the moves they've made in the transfer portal and bringing Chip Kelly in to run the offense. But this is pretty much just going to be a schedule preview. Now, these conferences have changed, expanded. Pac-12 is gone, right? So you take a look at Ohio State in the Big Ten. They're bringing in, of course, Southern Cal, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. The divisions are gone within the Big Ten. So the combination of those two things is leading to some very different schedules, not just in the Big Ten, but across the country with these conferences that have changed, but specifically for this video in the Big Ten. It used to be you sort of had a team schedule memorized based on what division they were in, basically, about 80% of it, right? You knew they were going to play all of the teams in their division and play their rivalry games, that kind of thing. And then maybe every offseason you'd have to take a look at the non-con schedule or who they were playing this year from the opposite division, that kind of thing. All that's gone now. These schedules are going to change drastically from year to year, especially over the next few years as we kind of get through this transition period of college football with teams moving around, conferences potentially going away, things like that. So schedules are going to be very important. Schedules are always important. I mean, I think we all know that in the world of college football, schedules are not created equally. Now, it's something that we sort of simultaneously complain about while also celebrating a little bit, I think. We like to differentiate ourselves as college football fans from the NFL. And the scheduling in college football is one of the ways that college football differs from the NFL. You've got some conferences that play 9 conference games, some play 8. Some conferences have divisions, some don't. For a while, some conferences had conference championship games, some didn't. Not all schedules are created equally. So you look at 2 teams at the end of the year, particularly 2 teams in 2 different conferences, but even 2 teams within the same conference, and you say, okay, they're both 10-2, they must be about equal. Not necessarily has that been the case in the world of college football throughout the years, and it's going to be less the case going forward, I think, because of the huge discrepancy. And I don't know, there's not really anything you can do about it, I don't think. I'm not complaining. I'm just kind of pointing out the obvious. When you've got 4 or 5 major conferences spread throughout the country and no universal scheduling requirements, and you're sort of making up these schedules on the fly as you go, especially now with expansion, 2 teams within the same conference can have drastically different schedules, drastically different strength of schedules. Who do you choose to play in the non-con, right? Which of your conference opponents do you get at home versus which ones do you get on the road? When do your bye weeks come? When is your rivalry game? Do you have a period on your schedule where you play 2 or 3 pretty good teams in a row? That can become increasingly difficult week to week as you sort of stack those things up. So we're doing this series of videos and kind of looking at some schedules for some of the key teams in 2024. And that's really it. Again, I do prediction videos, but I don't do those until later in the offseason. I usually start those around June. I like to watch the spring games. We have another portal window that opens up in May. I like to kind of wait a little while longer before I start doing prediction videos. But obviously, Ohio State is going to be one of the top-ranked teams heading into 2024. I mean, that's not really a spoiler there. I think everybody knows that. They're one of the highest-ranked teams heading into the season almost every single year. And then when you look at the addition of Chip Kelly, plus what they did in the transfer portal, there's going to be a lot of expectations heaped on Ohio State for 2024. Michigan has lost their coaching staff. They've lost their quarterback. They've lost several key contributors on both sides of the ball over there. Ohio State appears to be the front runner in the Big Ten. Now, I think Oregon's going to be pretty, I think Oregon's going to be pretty good. Washington probably going to take a few steps back. They lost a lot of talent, plus the coaching staff obviously gone there too. So it kind of appears that the Big Ten is kind of Ohio State's for the taking, but how does the schedule set up for that? Well, let's take a look at it. We're going to go through it right now. Their spring game is on April 13th. See it listed there, the Life Sports spring game at noon on April 13th. But let's get into the regular season here. So the Big Ten plays 9 conference games, so Ohio State is going to start out with 3 non-conference games. This is sort of a familiar scheduling model that a lot of teams in the Big Ten use. Not all of them, but a lot of them from year to year will do the 3 non-con games right up front and then 9 straight conference games to close the season, and that's what Ohio State has going on here. Now, Michigan has been heavily criticized over the last few years for their non-conference schedule for good reason. Michigan went 2 or 3 years in a row without playing a single Power 5 opponent in their non-conference schedule. One of the main groups of people criticizing Michigan for that was Ohio State fans, because they, of course, were busy playing home and homes with Notre Dame and things like that. Well, the tables have kind of turned here. The script has been flipped, as they say, but Ohio State's non-conference schedule this year is just a joke. That's not trash talk. That's not that's just reality. I mean, Ohio State fans really have no choice but to agree. Now, you can make the argument that the non-conference schedule is irrelevant. The goal is to make the playoffs in college football, in my opinion, in a 12-team playoff. How do you make the playoffs? Well, most likely 10-2 or better in a major conference is going to get you into the playoffs, regardless of who you beat or who you didn't beat. Now, I guess there could be some scenarios down the road where maybe a team finishes 9-3, but because they played an extremely difficult schedule, maybe they had a really good win or two, they had a loss against a really good team or something, and so they potentially could get in at 9-3 because they had a difficult schedule. But honestly, if the goal is to get into the playoffs, it's hard to knock what Ohio State's got going on here, but they play Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall, all at home to start the season. Now, they have a bye week in there, and you'll notice as we start to scroll through this schedule here that Ohio State has 2 bye weeks. Every team in the country has 2 bye weeks this year. It's not a change in college football, but we've got enough change going on in college football. It's just the way the calendar is set up. You guys know the college football season starts every year on Labor Day weekend, and then conference championship games are played the first Saturday in December, right? Well, normally that encompasses 14 Saturdays, 12 regular season games, a bye week, and conference championship games. That normally ends up being 14 weekends. Because of the way the calendar falls this year, that same time frame encompasses 15 weekends. So that equates to every team getting 2 bye weeks. So out of that 15-week period, you'll play 12 regular season games. You'll get 2 bye weeks. That's 14 weeks. And then conference championship Saturday on the 15th week, the first Saturday in December. So Akron, Western Michigan, a bye week, and then Marshall. That's the extent of Ohio State's non-conference schedule. Now, Ohio State fans, you're just going to have to be prepared to catch some slack for this, to trash talk. People are going to say things about your non-con schedule. You really don't have any choice but to sit there and take it because, like I said, plenty of people have had plenty to say about Michigan in particular's non-con schedule over the last few years, including Ohio State fans, and now the shoe is on the other foot, so to speak. This non-con schedule is just pitiful and pathetic. I mean, it's just what it is. Some of the pushback is, well, we play 9 conference games. The SEC only plays 8. I mean, like I said, you can go back and forth all you want. I'm not even talking about the SEC. I'm talking about Michigan. Ohio State fans have been clowning Michigan about not playing Power 5 teams in non-con for years. And now here we are. Ohio State has a non-conference schedule that includes 0 Power 5 teams, Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall with a bye week on September 14th. After the Marshall game, they start their conference schedule. So they're going to start out on the road at Michigan State, a team that's not expected to be very good in 2024. They haven't been very good for a couple of years now. They had one pop year under Mel Tucker with that running back they brought in from Wake Forest. I'm drawing a blank on his name now. But other than that, it has not been good at Michigan State for the last several years. Even though this is a road game for Ohio State, you would assume this is a game where Ohio State would be a significant favorite. Then you get to come back home and play Iowa. Iowa's had one of the best defenses in the conference over the last several years, and their offense is on a milk carton. It's been years since anyone has seen Iowa's offense. Now, they've made a lot of changes this offseason. We'll see what that means going forward. But again, a home game for Ohio State with kind of a revamped offense. I mean, they're still going to have the elite wide receivers led by Emeka Egbuka. They still have Travion Henderson running the ball, but a new quarterback in, a tandem situation at running back by bringing Quinson Judkins in. You would like to think, if you're an Ohio State fan, that the offense is going to be good enough to be able to put up some yards and some points on Iowa at home to win that game. I think Ohio State would be favored. Then it gets a lot more difficult. On the road at Oregon. Now, when you look at most of the preseason or offseason top 25 rankings, which I know mean absolutely nothing, but I'm just pointing it out because they're out there. When you look at most of these offseason rankings, you see the same 3 teams in positions 1, 2, and 3. And the order is sometimes switched around. But you're seeing the same 3 teams over and over again ranked in the top 3 of all of these preseason rankings. Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon. I guess you could throw Texas in there too. But basically, so if you want to say like top 4, that's basically the top 4 in almost every single ranking you see. Those 4 teams in some order. You've got to play this one on the road at Oregon. It's an unfamiliar environment. This is one of the new teams into the Big Ten. So this isn't a situation where Ohio State is kind of used to playing there every other year because of a conference rotation or anything like that. Oregon has one of the best home field advantages in all of college football, probably the best home field advantage west of the Mississippi River, definitely west of the Rockies. And Oregon is going to be a really good team, led by Dan Lanning at head coach, headed into his 3rd year. He's had 2 really good years at Oregon. Bo Nix is gone. They've got new quarterback situation there, but they've recruited at an elite level. They've got a lot of talent. And like I said, that home field advantage is no joke. Oregon beat Ohio State in Columbus a few years ago. Ohio State will be looking for revenge. It's possible Ohio State could be a small underdog in this game. We'll have to see what Oregon has done up to this point in the season. I think it's likely that Ohio State would be undefeated headed into this game. When you look at, their most difficult game before this Oregon game is probably that Iowa game, but it's at home. And until anybody sees Iowa do something offensively, it's hard to have a lot of faith in Iowa's ability to go on the road and beat a team like Ohio State, who had one of the best defenses in the country last year and returns a lot of talent on that side of the ball. So, depending on how Oregon's schedule sets up, and maybe we'll look at Oregon's schedule in one of these videos here coming up soon, but this is going to be a huge, huge game, not just in the Big Ten, but nationally in college football. I would not be surprised if Ohio State's a small favorite in that one, and that's going to be a tough game to pick. And then you get your second bye week on October 19th, and you come out of that second bye week, and you've got 6 conference games in a row to close out your season, starting home against Nebraska. Now, there's a lot of sort of, I don't even want to, hype isn't even really the right word. I don't think there's a lot of hype around Nebraska. Maybe interest. A little more optimism than usual, maybe, around Nebraska. Matt Rule, year 2. He has a track record of inheriting pretty bad teams and making them pretty good by year 2 or year 3. They had a pretty good recruiting class. They, of course, got Dylan Raiola, 5-star quarterback, and a lot of people expect him to start right away. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Quarterback was a glaring weakness for Nebraska last year. They definitely need help at that position. Been forever since Nebraska's even made a bowl game. I think they have 2016, I think, was the last time they even made a bowl game. A win like this for Matt Rule at Nebraska is the type of win that could change the trajectory of that program. Not that they would go on to win a national title this year, but this would be sort of a plant your flag in the ground type of win for Nebraska. Now, it's a home game for Ohio State, and they have a bye week before. So, again, it's a game where you would expect Ohio State to be a significant favorite. On the road at Penn State. Now, I have to admit here, I am sort of off the Penn State deal. Not that I think they're going to be a bad team, but I think they're going to be the same team they've been until I see them not be that team, which is to say they're going to beat everybody that's worse than them, and they're going to lose to everybody that's better than them. I mean, how many years do I have to sit here and watch Penn State go out and beat everybody they play except the best 2 or 3 teams in the league? It just happens year after year after year after year, and I'm just to the point now where I've got to see it to believe it. I'm a huge James Franklin fan. It is a home game for Penn State. And look, eventually Penn State is going to beat either Ohio State or Michigan or whoever the top team in the Big Ten in some given year happens to be. But I'm going to have to see it before I'll believe it. Even though this is a home game for Penn State, it seems like one Ohio State can win just based on recent history. You come back home, take on Purdue, a team I'm not expecting to be very good. On the road at Northwestern. Now, Northwestern had a good record last year, a surprisingly good record, coming off of a win-win season. Fired their coach in June for the hazing stuff, promoted from within, and ended up winning 9 or 10 games last year. One of the biggest turnarounds in college football was with Northwestern. I don't think Northwestern was a top 25 team. I don't think they were one of the best 25 teams in the country or whatever it was. They played in the Big Ten West, and the reality is, and I know we don't have divisions in the Big Ten anymore, so it doesn't have anything to do with this year, but looking specifically last year when it comes to Northwestern, winning 9 or 10 games when you play in the Big Ten West doesn't mean that much to me. Those teams were just absolutely horrible. And when 2 terrible teams play, somebody's got to win. And in a lot of cases, that terrible team that won was Northwestern. I don't hate Northwestern, but it's hard to get overly excited about them. You play them there, probably one of the worst home field advantages in the country there at Northwestern. Ohio State will be a significant favorite. Come back home, play Indiana, another team that sort of scrapes the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten. And then, of course, the game that some people say is the only game that matters this season for Ohio State and Ryan Day. I disagree. Look, I understand the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. I do, and I know every fan base wants to win that game 100% of the time. And this whole idea that, well, if Ryan Day loses to Michigan again, he's getting fired. No. If Ryan Day goes 11-1 and that loss is to Michigan, he's not getting fired. You know where he's going? The playoffs. That's where. 12-team playoffs. 11-1 with a loss to Michigan, Ohio State's going into the playoffs. Probably with a first-round bye. Or at least a home game. Not a first-round bye, but a home game. And potentially a first-round. Look, if Ohio State is 11-0 and they lose to Michigan, and that leaves them there at 11-1, they're probably playing Michigan again the following week. Now, if they lose to Michigan 2 weeks in a row because of the Big Ten championship game, then, you know, maybe all bets are off. But in all seriousness, though, whatever happens in this Ohio State-Michigan game, I expect Ohio State to be in the playoffs. Michigan, I'm not so sure. I could see Michigan losing 3 games this year. Just a lot of turnover there. So we'll see. But win or lose this Ohio State-Michigan game, I expect Ohio State to be in the 12-team playoff. Now, as a fan base, as an administration, are y'all willing to accept a 6 or 7 seed in the playoffs? I mean, that's really what it comes down to if you lose to Michigan. Or you don't win the Big Ten. But anyway, that's a look at the Ohio State schedule. It'll be another big game, of course, Ohio State and Michigan. Again, this isn't a prediction video, just taking a look at the schedules because they have drastically changed, like I mentioned. So looking at this, is Oregon the only team? Yeah, okay, so Oregon's the only new team that Ohio State plays as far as new teams to the Big Ten. They don't play UCLA. They don't play Washington. And they don't play Southern Cal. They get the toughest draw, though. Oregon, I think, is the best of the 4 teams that are moving into the Big Ten. Not only does Ohio State have to play Oregon, they have to play them in Eugene at Autzen Stadium, a difficult place to play. So, again, just to recap, the non-con is non-existent. It should be an easy 3-0 for Ohio State in the non-con. They play no Power 5 opponents. As far as the conference schedule goes, toughest game, probably, I think, at Oregon. Most important game, probably at home against Michigan. Difficult road games. At Michigan State, no, not a difficult road game. At Oregon, yeah. So that's one really difficult road game. At Penn State, I would classify that as a difficult road game. Again, I talked about that game a few minutes ago. You know my kind of thoughts on Penn State as a whole. But still, when you're looking at difficult places to play in the Big Ten, at Penn State is somewhere on that list, I think. So I would classify that as a difficult road game. At Northwestern, no. So at Oregon, at Penn State, the two most difficult road games for sure. What about any 2 or 3 week stretches where you've got 2 or 3 tough games in a row? Well, Iowa and Oregon, again, make what you will of Iowa. Nebraska and Penn State. Now, it's possible if Nebraska is a little bit further ahead than we think they are, that this becomes maybe a little bit of a tough 2-game stretch here, Nebraska and Penn State. And that's about it for like tough stretches of games there. So anyway, there it is. Ohio State's 2024 college football schedule. What do you think about it? How does it compare to some of the other schedules I've seen? And if you want to throw an early prediction down in the comments, go ahead. Again, I don't do predictions this early in the offseason. I usually wait till around June to start making my prediction videos, but I do like to start going ahead and looking at the schedules here because it's not just about how good a team is, right? It's about who do they play, where do they play them, and when do they play them. So there you go. Ohio State's 2024 schedule. Let me know what you think down below. Have a good morning.